Next up, we're going to hear from Anna, and Anna is a graphic designer and front end developer. Um, so let's bring Anna to the stage. Hi, Anna.
Hello,
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've been pretty nervous for the last hour or so, but
Oh, no. Me too. Me too.
yeah. Okay.
It's going to be fine. We're a great community. We're super excited to hear what you have to say. Um, it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
Just take a deep
it
breath.
was a common conversation, the one you had with Saskia. So hopefully I
That's
will get it out
good.
of it as well as she did.
Excellent. So you're going to kind of give us a retrospective and sort of lessons learned on the agency that you work for, first Sanity project, right? And
Yes,
it
that's right.
is, I'm going to mispronounce this. It's like Draga e Megan.
Yes, drage i magen. It's a dragon in the belly in English.
Yes, which is a Norwegian podcast and set of tools that works to help parents explain emotions to children. Um, and y'all built this with the Next.js Insanity starter, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so awesome. Well, let's get into it. I'm excited to hear about that. Do you want to share screen?
Yes, I'll bring it up right
Okay.
here. So
Okay. All right. So I'm going to add that. Okay. And all right. Good luck. It's going to be great, Anna. You're going to do fantastic. I'm going to drop off now and you can start whenever you're ready. Okay.
yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, so hello. My name is Anna. I'm working at Kult Byrå here in Oslo. We are a design and technology agency, so we primarily work with visual identities and web design and web development. So what I'm going to be talking about is our first customer project using Sanity, which was this website called Drage i Magen, or as I said, Dragon in the Belly in English, which Lauren mentioned, is a podcast series about which emotions a child can go through in everyday life and how we can help them understand and cope with these emotions. So before we start, I would like to give some background information about myself. So I'm really a designer at heart. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in graphic design in 2017. But then I got a job at an IT company, so I realized that I had to redirect my path a little bit away from what I originally thought I was going to do, because what they needed was a web designer and a web developer, and not really the traditional graphic designer. So I started developing using WordPress and was doing that for about 3 years. And then in the middle of the pandemic, in October 2020, I got a job at Kult, where I'm working now. And they had begun flirting with Sanity, and their plan was to move forward developing websites using Sanity, Next, and React. So this meant I had to learn React. So in November 2020, I took a React course, and then in December 2020, I dived into my first project using Sanity, which was Drage i Magen. And I've learned a lot in the year that has passed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the project of Drage i Magen in sort of a retrospective manner and take a look at the way we did things then, what we've learned from it, how we have developed internally, and how we're using Sanity now. So I'm going to show you some parts of the project of Drage i Magen and compare it to one of our more recent projects that we worked on this last fall, which is HTU, Husleietvistutvalget in Norwegian, or the Rent Dispute Tribunal in English, which is a state-run institution here in Norway that informs about and processes disputes between tenants and landlords. So what I'm going to be focusing on is, of course, the approach for both projects, but also the editing experience, especially from a customer perspective, and how we've developed and enhanced on that. So this is our website for Drage i Magen. It's a fairly simple site. We build our websites using modules, which I recall Nick DiMario gave a talk about in the previous virtual meetup. So that's how we think about developing our sites as well. And this is the studio for Dragimagin. And I have to admit, while preparing to do this talk, I went over this project and there was just a ton of stuff that I wanted to fix immediately, but I purposely did not do it just to further prove that this was really the starting point. So the first thing I want to talk about is the global data structure. And by global data, I mean all of the data that is available at all times throughout the website, no matter which page you're on. So for instance, the header and the footer and stuff like that. So for Dragimagin, I chose to put all of the global data into one singleton document right here called settings. And I apologize in advance that both of these studios are in Norwegian. I will try my best to explain what's going on. But this is our singleton settings document. And here we have our logo, we have our menu. Here we can select the page we want to use for privacy policy. We have some footer content, a rich text field, and then this very non-descriptive image, which is actually the small badge way down here. So because this is a fairly simple site, the setup, it works for now. But what if we wanted to build or expand upon our site? For instance, here we are reusing the exact same menu in the footer as in the header. What if we wanted to have a different menu in the footer than in the header? Or what if we wanted to add some more contact details to the footer? Or what if we wanted to add some more options to the header? And so on. Then this singleton document could get pretty messy pretty quickly because it would just be one long document with a bunch of fields, and it would be hard, especially for the customer, to know where to look for what. So now that Sanity has the field groups functionality, this would solve our problem, but I still think it makes sense, at least for more complex sites, to compartmentalize the global data. So that's what we did for HTU. Here we have a list item called settings, and underneath we have a bunch of different singleton documents for different purposes. So here we have our header settings, our footer settings, here we have some SEO and metadata stuff, and so on. So for instance, our header settings, it only consists of a main menu, but this just makes it so much clearer what you're currently working with. I mean, it's highlighted all the way. You're at settings, you're at header, and then this is the header menu. There's no doubt about what you're currently editing. And from a design perspective, this is so useful, especially working with customers, because surprisingly, some people have a hard time figuring out where to look for what. They know what they want to edit, but they can't find it. So they come to us and ask for help. And we want our customers to be able to administrate their website by themselves. So the more simple and intuitive we can make the editing experience, the better. And I think ideally, the editing experience should be so intuitive that we shouldn't even have to create, tutorial videos or guides. I think maybe that's a utopia, but I still think that it's a good thing to aim for. And we even have some stuff in here that isn't even global data, like this privacy policy page. It just makes more sense to put it under settings than anywhere else in the studio. So for this privacy policy page, we could have done it like we did on Dragimagin. Here, the privacy policy page is just a normal page, like any other page. And then we reference it here under settings in this reference field. Whereas for HTU, we went with a slightly different approach because I was thinking about this privacy policy page. And because of GDPR, the privacy policy page always has to be there. You shouldn't delete it. You shouldn't really create a new one. If you want to do something with it, you should just edit it. So it doesn't really have the same attributes as a normal page. So it made sense to make it as a single document. And the same for this 404. This is a multilingual site, so I wanted to be able to create a custom error message for each language, and I wanted it to be a rich text field so I could add internal links and format the text. So yeah, I think data structure-wise, it doesn't really matter. I don't care personally. This could all be under one singleton document called site or global or settings or whatever. This is purely for the editing experience. This just makes it so much easier, especially for the customer. You have your icons, which makes it easy to know where to look for what. You can use dividers to group related stuff, and it just makes for a so much smoother editing experience. So the second thing I want to talk about is the menu. This is our menu for Dragemagen, and as I mentioned, we are reusing the exact same menu in the header as in the footer. And it's a pretty basic menu. It's just one level, 5 menu items, all internal links. So I think this is pretty much the most basic menu you can create with Sanity. It's just an array of reference to page. So it's just one field. And because this is a fairly simple site, it works for now. But it becomes clear that once the needs of the project expands, that this solution is pretty limiting. For instance, what if I wanted to use one of these pages in the menu, like this one, why focus on emotions? But it has a pretty long title, so maybe I want to shorten the title just for the menu item. Or what if I wanted to add an external link? I know that happens pretty rarely, that you want to add an external link to your main menu, but I still feel like not having the opportunity to do it at all is pretty limiting. And what if I wanted to add a drop-down menu? I have no possibility of doing that either. So what we did for HTU was we have our menu array here, which consists of a menu object, and within this menu object, we have some options. So you can select whether the menu item is an internal link, an external link, or a dropdown. And based on what you select, you get some different fields. So this is built using conditional fields. So for instance, for internal link, we have a reference field, and then you can select whether you want to apply a custom title. And what was funny is actually, as I was preparing to do this talk, I realized there is no need for this Boolean right here. I could just have this custom title field show up at all times. I mean, it almost takes up the same space as this Boolean field, and I could just apply this value, if there is a value. So yeah, realizing stuff all the time. And then you can even select a color for the menu item. And then for the external link, the reference field is replaced with a URL field. And then for the dropdown, you have to specify a custom title, and then you can add some submenu items, which in turn you can select whether it's internal or external. And here you can even choose to feature the submenu item and sort of style it as a button. So this is what our menu looks like for HTU. You can see as I hover, there's a small dot that has the color that we chose. So these two are normal internal links, and this is a dropdown. And here you can see sort of the featured submenu item with that style as a button. So I think this solution works pretty good. But the other day I actually saw a Sanity project that someone had made, and they had went with a slightly different approach. So instead of having an array that consists of one menu item object, with all of these options and variables, they had an array consisting of different objects. So one internal link object, one external link object, and then one drop-down object, so that when you press add item down here, you can immediately select what kind of item you want to add. And I think that was a pretty smart solution, and I don't really know why I haven't thought about that, but I'm definitely going to try that out for my next project. So the next thing I want to talk about is the page builder, or the solution for creating modulated content. So as I mentioned, we create our websites using modules. As you see here, this is sort of a text module. This is a last episodes module, and this is a form module. And a module is basically just an object in the schema that eventually becomes a module in the front end. And the way I saw it, we had two ways on how we could go about with this. Either we could use objects in a normal array, like this, like you see here, or we could use objects as blocks within a rich text field, like you can see here. So this would be our object or module within the rich text field, and this would be our object or module within an array. So I'm just going to call them, this is the array approach, and this is the rich text approach, just in the lack of better words and just for the simplicity. So what I chose to go with for Dragemagen for the front page and the main pages was the array approach, because it's not really that text heavy of a site. And many of our modules, or most of the modules, actually fill up the entire screen width. So it didn't really make sense to me to put them inside of a rich text field. As you can see here, I mean, we do have some text, but the content isn't really centered around the text itself. We have a bunch of different modules with different designs. So yeah, that's the approach we went with for the main page, the front page, and the main pages. Whereas for the more simple parts of this website, like for instance episodes, you can see here, episodes has a cover image, an episode number, a title, a text describing the episode, and then an embed. So what we chose to go with here was just a simple rich text field for the text content. This is a rich text field with basic configuration, so there's no custom blocks you can add. And then we actually have a separate embed field right here, which means that in the front end, this embed will have sort of a fixed position. For instance, if this text was longer and I wanted to put this embed right in the middle of it somewhere, I have no opportunity of doing that now. So what we've come to do in more recent projects is actually use a combination of the two approaches, the array approach and the rich text approach. So for the main pages or the document types that are built solely using modules, we use the array approach. While as for instance, articles, articles oftentimes have sort of a fixed layout, a fixed design. We have our title, we have our cover image, and a publish date, and these things are always going to be in the same position no matter which article you're currently viewing. And then we want all of the article content to stay within sort of a more narrow column, because we don't want the text line to get too long, because then it would get hard to read. But we still want to be able to add some blocks or mini modules if you'd like, just to sort of make the content a bit more varied and interesting. So for these cases, we use the rich text approach. Like you see here, this is the exact same document. So here we have a block or a mini module that has info box, and here we have sort of a bulk with an icon you can select. So this is just to make the reading experience a bit more enjoyable and interesting. So that's the approach we're going for. Of course, we always have to assess the project needs and the customer's needs. Actually, a project I was working on last year, I originally went with the array approach because that made sense at the time, and that was kind of what the design, told me to do. But it became clear once we handed over the studio to the customer, so they could add content before the site would get launched, that this was not really the ideal solution for them. Because what they were creating was long case studies, and they wanted to be able to quickly reorganize and reorder all of the content within that case study. So with the array approach, what you would have to do, if you, for instance, wanted to move some text from this module over to this module, you would have to enter this module, select the text, copy, exit, enter, paste. So this was kind of tedious for them. So I actually had to change from the array approach to the rich text approach. So it's just something to have in mind, that the design and the sort of desired approach for that design doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with the customer's needs. So the last thing I want to talk about is references. And I think references is one of the greatest things about Sanity. It's just really nice to have, one source of truth, one document where the content lives, and then be able to reuse it as you go and as you please. So I wanted to utilize this functionality for Dragemagen somehow. So I created this quotes document type, which are just simple quotes with a citation. And then I wanted to be able to sort of sprinkle these quotes throughout the website. So I created this quotes module. Let's see. So here is our quotes module. Here we can select which quotes we want to display. And this is what it looks like in the front end. So this is our quotes module right here. So this is sort of just a fun way of sort of adding some cake topping to your website. And I think this is probably the bare minimum you could do with references in Sanity. So for HTU, we took references a step further. Because HTU has a bunch of different document types. We have the front page, normal pages, and then we have all of the document types within these two dividers. This is complaints and replies. Here we have rights and obligations. This is common disputes, articles, and news. And all of the documents within these document types are related to each other somehow. And we wanted to make it simple for the visitor to find related content, no matter which document within these document types they're currently viewing. So for instance, if we go to, just let me change to English. So here we have a document under rights and obligations document type, and we want to show, common disputes that can occur that are related to this rights and obligations document, and also related articles. And one way we could go about with this is to directly reference these documents between each other, so that this document reference this document, or vice versa, that this document reference this document and this document and this document, and the same for articles. But we felt like this wasn't really a flexible solution, because not only do we want to show common disputes that are related to rights and obligations, we also want to show related articles for disputes. So there could potentially be a lot of references going all over the place, and it could be hard to maintain. So what we chose to go with was to create a document type called subjects. And then instead of having to reference these documents between each other, you actually just reference one or more subjects, and then the rest is taken care of automatically. So this potentially saves a lot of time, especially for the editor, because you don't have to manually pick and select every document that is related to the document you're creating. You can just select the subject, and then the rest is taken care of automatically by Grok. So yeah, that's it. As you probably noticed, this is a constant learning experience. And I mean, some of the solutions we've applied for HTU, we've already further developed into the projects we're running now. But I think that one of the beauties of Sanity is that this learning process is so much fun. I'm having such a great time, working and building the studio. And I'm looking forward to every new project, because I know I'm going to be learning something new. So thank you.
Awesome. That was fantastic, Anna. Thank you so much for that presentation and that talk. So let me see. Are there any questions in the chat? If not, I have a couple questions. So, in terms of your learning and building, what would you say was one of the most difficult concepts for you to grasp when you were working with Sanity at first?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I was pretty new to JavaScript as a whole, so I think, and also just coding. I have only worked with WordPress, so just reading documentation is an obstacle in itself. So yes, so I think just getting into the mindset probably was the biggest obstacle, just to know what you are looking for. Yeah, like knowing what to search for when you're into trouble. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and so shifting gears, but sort of along that lines, what have you observed anything that has been particularly difficult, or anything that your clients stumble on in terms of their editor experience when they go in to put in contact or content, or something that seems like a concept that's hard for them to grasp when they put in content?
Mm. Hmm. I don't know, like a specific thing. I think it's so much about like how we structure the studio for them. I feel like if we haven't done a good enough job, then of course it will be hard for them to know where to edit what. At least for the more complex sites we make, there's a lot of references going on, and there's a lot of document types. So then, of course, it can be hard for them, because in my head, when I'm working on a project, everything makes so much sense, and it's kind of hard to understand that it doesn't necessarily make that much sense to someone who hasn't been with the project all the way.
Right, exactly. That makes sense. We do have a question in the chat. It's from Carrie, who's going to be our next speaker, she asked, you created a great editorial experience for your client. Can you tell us about your process for working with them to sort of hone in and create that great editorial experience?
Yeah, so for some of our clients, we usually like build all of the schema. That's the first thing we do. We build the schema so that the studio is up and running, so that we can actually hand the studio over to the customer so they can start filling it with content before the front end is ready. And most of the time, customers come to us with some stuff that doesn't really work the way they expect, or they're having some difficulties, and then we adjust along the way.
That makes sense. All right, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming in. That was a fantastic talk.
Thank
Um,
you.
there's a bunch of rounds of applause in the chat for you. That's fantastic. I can't believe it was your first talk. You did fantastic. It was so good.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you again.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.